It is Locked On Jazz for the 14th of March. Oh my goodness, do I have a ton of stuff for you. How we're getting it all in, I have no idea. The gauntlet starts now. Let's be honest, the team is flawed, but so is the West. The weekend of games that was an interesting matchup with the Bucks, and Giannis, the former MVP and champ, is in town. And I'm going to get it all in the next 30 minutes on this edition of Locked On Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, how are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Hit subscribe on YouTube and put that little bell button and be notified every time we start. And if you're on your podcast player, please follow along so that you get future episodes. The gauntlet starts today. This is where we get the last chance before the season starts to warm it up without much practice time and figure out who this team is. 67 games in, there's a lot of talk about like being ready by game 70. 10 of the next 11 games are against teams that will play in the playoffs, including tonight against the champs, Chicago, one of the hottest teams in the league, then the Clippers, then we go east for New York, who's not a playoff team. Then we play the Brooklyn Nets, the Boston Celtics, the Charlotte Hornets, the Dallas Mavericks, the LA Clippers, come back for the Lakers, I believe, and then the Warriors. 10 of our next 11 games, the gauntlet gets dropped while simultaneously trying to get healthy. And maybe most importantly, trying to get healthy. But it's a pretty awesome stretch here for the next 11 games for us to dramatically overreact every time there's a game. So as we head into this, I wanted to just hit one kind of either stark reality or just reality. And that is, we're flawed. Like, we're flawed. We're more flawed than we were a year ago, right? Joe Ingles, injured, never had a great year, no longer with us. Rudy Gay hasn't clicked into that role the way we had hoped. There's some strange little statistical things that show we're not quite the same team that we were. We'll get into that later in the show about how both Milwaukee and Utah, I think, are the two most scouted teams in the NBA. But, and the flaws are real, and they should be problematic, and they should worry us, and I'm sure they worry Quinn. But the fact of the matter is, we almost fooled ourselves last year into believing we were flawless. When if you really go back and look at last year, we weren't. And of the same things that got us in the playoffs last year had got us earlier in the year. And it was almost this game of like, can we sneak by without everyone finding out all of our weaknesses? I mean, if you go back to a game against the Clippers early in the year, it was either January 1st on like the 5th game of the year, or it was in the next meeting with the Clippers in February. The Jazz are in control of the game, and the Clippers go to 5 wide, and Marcus Morris suddenly plays center in that game, and the Clippers go on this dramatic run, like a 9-0, 10-0 run in the fourth quarter. I think it was like the 5th game of the year, if I remember correctly. And our 14-point lead goes down to 3 or 1 with like 3 minutes left in the game, and we pull it out. But the middle part of it, if I remember correctly, is that Serge Ibaka is suddenly playing center, and the Clippers have spread us out to 5 wide, and we get exposed, and we're like, okay, we won that game, but oh no. And then, if I remember correctly, in February 17th or 19th, which is the 2 times we played the Clippers, we went and played the back-to-back in LA, these are always weird memories to me because every game last year felt the same because they were all coming out of the same studio, basically. But we go to LA, playing them back-to-back games, and in the second game, they make a similar change, and the game is close, and then all of a sudden, they go to 5 wide, this time with Morris instead of Ibaka, and they're hitting the corner 3, and we get beat late. And it was like, oh, there's our flaw. And we snuck through the rest of a season when there wasn't a lot of prep and there wasn't a lot of shoot around, and we got through it, and we played a team in the first round, was totally overmatched, now looks much better. And then we got exposed again. Our flaw got exposed. The thing is that flaw still exists. We know it, and everyone in the world knows it now. And so it's getting exposed at a more regular basis, and we're getting more opportunity to try it. And we're probably, other than the team we're playing tonight, the most scouted team in all of the NBA. And so the flaws we have show up. And then the other part of the story that plays into it is we have these little areas where we're not quite as good as last year. Last year, we were pretty perfect. We were shooting it. We were playing fast. We were doing all these things. Everyone was having a career year. We're not as perfect. The thing about this is that everyone in the West has a flaw other than Phoenix. And Phoenix has got a flaw that Chris Paul's right thumb ligament isn't attached to the bone anymore. Or that the bone isn't attached to the bone and the ligament's attached to the bone. And it's pretty serious. Now, they're fighting through it, and they're amazing, and they're as close to flawless as it gets, and they're the dominant team, and they deserve that respect. That they've been to the finals, and as Chauncey Billups said to me the other night, they're playing with a broken heart that they want to rectify. We don't have that same, quite honestly, aspect. We haven't played with that same vigor that Phoenix has played this year, that Milwaukee played with last year, that got them the championship. Maybe we add it here in the final. Maybe that Spurs loss was like the bottom of the barrel of how crappy we can actually feel as a group that gets them through. Time will tell. But all of them are flawed. Memphis has got its flaws. They play, hey, it's great the way they're playing. Can they force that kind of turnovers? Can they play at that speed? Can they live in that kind of transition in the postseason? Probably not. The Warriors are great. Super win the other night against Denver, and then another good win against Milwaukee, but they're flawed. They've got all sorts of little things that aren't quite right about that team. We've seen it. Dallas, brilliant win against Boston, but a terrible loss the other night. Denver's not quite there, particularly they may be next year if they get everybody together. So the fact is, we're flawed. We're psychoanalyzing ourselves. We're looking at, we're right. So's everyone. Those flaws could look bigger in the next 11 games because 10 of our next 11 are against teams that are really good, really playing for something, and after it. There's two things here that are important about the big picture of the league, and then we'll get to, and I have so many things today. I don't want to lose focus, which I have a tendency to do. So one is what's happened in the league. And again, Phoenix probably deserves the credit for being kind of above this a little bit. Is we've had more champions we've had 5 champions in 5 years, I believe it is. The last time that happened was 1979 to the Boston Celtics and taking it back. The Magic Bird era, if you start there, has never had 5 champions in 5 years. If it was not for a weird TV blip that took place that allowed Kevin Durant to go to the Warriors, we would actually have probably 7 champions in 7 years. And this is all because of the luxury tax and the way the league has built itself over the years. And it's really impressive. This is exactly what the league wanted to build, wanted to create, and they've done it. And so part of what you're seeing when you look at the Utah Jazz right now and the flaws that they have and that everyone else has is that there just isn't that 30% chance to make the finals, 50% chance to make the finals, 80% chance to make the finals. There isn't that Warriors, Cleveland, we know it's coming. Lakers, Celtics, we know it's coming. Jazz, Bulls, we know it's coming. That just doesn't exist anymore. The fact is, I could just as likely see the Jazz lose in the first round to Dallas as beat Dallas, play either the LA Clippers or the Phoenix Suns in the second round, win that series, and play Memphis or Golden State to go to the finals. They seem mathematically losing one series is much easier than the others, but it seems equally as possible. And that's because the league has changed dramatically from what we're used to, where the chances of winning used to be one team with 30%, another team with 30%, everybody else with 5%. If you look at Basketball Reference, the Suns who've earned this are at 28%, but they got that thumb issue. The Warriors are at 15%, and then the Jazz are at 10%, Miami's at 10%, Boston's at 11%, Philadelphia's at 2%, Milwaukee's at 5%, Memphis is at 6%, Dallas is at 2%. Like, it's just wide open. So being flawed and being spread out is actually reasonable. The second thing that's happened in this league that's great, and we're going to be the benefactors of it over the next 11 games, is that almost everyone's playing hard. Everyone is actually playing hard. Even Houston, Oklahoma City, Orlando's playing great. They should deserve a medal for what they've done the last 3 weeks, is playing because you've created an environment where 22 of the 30 teams are now trying to make the playoffs, even 24 because of the play-in. You then have 6 teams, and the odds between 1 and 5 are just so immaterial that you might as well just keep playing. And so teams are playing hard every night, and every game's a battle. And so you're seeing these Houston winning a game, Oklahoma City winning a game, Orlando winning games, Detroit beating teams they shouldn't beat. And the league's even different in that sense. And it's exposing a little of these things. So as we head down the gauntlet, I thought that was important to just kind of get. Yeah, the Spurs loss is brutal. And it exemplified a bunch of problems. It exemplified one problem that we've not seen before and might be the most disconcerting of them all. We'll get to that. The Kings win showed a little bit of what we've got that maybe some other people don't have, and we'll get into that, and then we'll dig deep into Milwaukee as that comes your direction. Monday edition of Locked On Jazz. Thanks very much for making us your first listen of the day. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located out in Woods Cross and in Logan. The Murdochs, over 80 years in Utah, and they are not, I tell you, going to take advantage and charge you more than MSRP for their vehicles, despite the fact that that's the going trend right now. They don't believe in it. And as I talked to Blake, it's like, I don't want to be the guy who goes to the grocery store, the church, or wherever and see people I grabbed an extra $5,000 for. Over the long run, it'll keep us in this market appreciated, respected. Our relationships will be good, and that's far more important than a momentary advantage to our bottom line. So the Murdochs are not charging you more than MSRP on any vehicles. That can be the Chevy trucks, the great Suburban, the great Tahoe. The trucks are the Silverado and the Colorado, or it can be on any of the super SUVs in the lineup as well. The Blazer, the Traverse, the Equinox, and the Trax bring up a fabulous SUV lineup that, of course, is kicked off by the Tahoe and the Suburban. It's all at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. Have you had the 100% marshmallow-infused Build Puffs? Protein-infused marshmallow? It's crazy. The churros, the coconut marshmallow, the ruby chocolate, the banana cream pie, or the lemon dip cheesecake are the Puff flavors that are out right now from Built. And you can get a Puffs mix box. They've also got a special Shamrock bar out right now. White chocolate mint bar, the Shamrock bar. Plus their regular flavors, mint brownie, double chocolate, raspberry, coconut, cookies and cream, salted caramel, and the nut flavors, coconut almond, along with the caramel almond delight. These are all fabulously tasting. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And here's the crazy thing. It's 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 sugars, and 17 grams of protein. It's Built. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get your 15% off at built.com. Yesterday, by the way, the Dallas Mavericks beat the Boston Celtics in Boston. And I thought it was a game-changing win in regards to playoff odds by Dallas. I was wrong. Our chances of being the 4th seed were 66% prior to the game. It's now 61%. And their chance of being the 5th seed was 57% and now still seems to be 57%. As crazy as that is from basketballreference.com. I can't quite figure that out and why that is, but it does seem to be that that's the case. Dallas is now 42-26. We're 42-25. So this is a battle for this spot. All right, here's the one thing that happened in that Spurs game. Yes, it was another close game loss. Yes, it was another 10-point deficit loss. The third one we've lost by double digits that we've led in the fourth quarter, which feels like it's been about 12, but it's actually 3. Which is, hey, the Grizzlies are 37-0. Phoenix is 42-0. We're 36-3. The Heat are 39-2. The Warriors are 35-2. We've lost 3. Okay. We shouldn't have lost that one. We've lost one more than basically everyone else. Our second half leads, we've lost a lot. We've lost 9. Now, here's a thing you can decide. I'd rather not lose 9 of them, but the fact that Jazz have had the most second half double-digit leads in the NBA this year might also tell you that we're pretty good. Like, being up 10 in this league's super hard, and that's a pretty good sign that we can do that. Now, we shoot a lot of threes, so maybe we have a wider variance in most teams, and we're going to do this by definition, that when you shoot that many threes. But we have led by 40. We've led in the second half of 45 games by double digits this year, the most of any team in the NBA, tied with Miami. The Suns are amazing. The Suns are 44-0 when they lead by 10. The Suns are better than everyone else, and we just got to give them that credit. I don't know if I mentioned this, but their point guard got a little piece of bone attached to a ligament. It's no longer attached to the bone. Okay, that's the hope on the Suns. Otherwise, they're better than everyone else. Give them credit. But that's a pretty big if. The thing that happened in that game against the Spurs that's disturbing is we got beat on the pick and roll. When you go back and look at our flaws of a year ago and that games I was talking about with the Clippers, that was people going 5 out, driving at us not being able to guard our yard, Rudy getting moved out of the middle, and us not being able to take advantage to be able to get Rudy back to the rim and being able to defend. And all year long, all we've worked on is how to keep Rudy near the rim against that, because that's what got us. And we've gotten pretty good at that. Gotten better. It means we allow a few more threes. We do some things a little differently defensively, but Rudy's staying around the rim at a pretty high rate, impacting things. We don't allow a lot of shots at the rim. We've still contort people's shot charts with Rudy. He's still impacting games. We're still pretty good at that. We're not as good defensively as we once were, but we're still pretty good at what we're talking about. What's a little disturbing about the loss to San Antonio is we got beat on the high pick and roll. And we don't usually get beat on the high pick and roll. Last year, Royce O'Neal and Rudy Gobert were dominantly the number 1 pick and roll combination defensively in the NBA, like by a mile. Rudy was the number 1 pick and roll defender in the NBA by a mile. And teams have gone away from playing pick and roll against us and generally gone to one-on-one isolation attack. We've seen it. They spread us out. They attack. They try to move Rudy out of the middle. We try to keep Rudy in the middle. Tonight will be a big game of that. That's kind of what's going on with us. The Spurs ran high pick and roll, high pick and roll, high pick and roll, high pick and roll, high pick and roll. DeJounte Murray and Jakob Poeltl, which, no offense to DeJounte Murray and Jakob Poeltl, that's not that awesome a combination. That shouldn't beat us like that. That's not one of the top 5 or top 10 pick and roll combinations in the league. And so the disturbing thing to that is that that's what beat us, because that's new. That's not a combination. Usually if someone's playing pick and roll, we're okay with it. Royce O'Neal and Rudy Gobert, out of the top 100 pick and roll combinations this year, are now 44th. So Rudy Gobert and Royce O'Neal have gone from being elite, I mean like crazy elite, to average. And that's a problem. That's got to get back to somehow being crazy elite. And I don't really know why that's that different. Some extent, I feel like have moved Rudy higher and we're worried about the pick and roll or the mid-range jumper, but it's still getting us. Now we drop Rudy a little bit. Royce seems to be getting picked off a little bit more. Royce could be banged up from years of doing this. I don't think he's old yet or tired, but he could have lost a little spring. It's not clear. But Jakob Poeltl and DeJounte Murray are, in the 60th percentile of pick and roll combos, and they just got us. And that's a bummer. Because that's not a way that we usually lose. So that's what was disturbing to me about the Spurs game. The other one on the Spurs game was the 38 minutes prior to the collapse in the final 10 minutes was as encouraging a 38 minutes as we've seen out of this team. The Spurs just brilliantly coached and scouted, disrupted what we wanted to run. We didn't have bogey. We couldn't spread the floor the same way. We had terrible struggles. We defended through it. We played brilliant defense for 38 without the offense clicking in. We stayed engaged the whole time. Our transition defense was terrific. We battled. We fought. We were 100% engaged. We weren't getting punked. None of the other weaknesses showed. And then this bizarre weakness happened at the end of the game, which has been a little bit of an issue all season, as Rudy and Royce are not as good as they once were. Or as they. Now, can they get back? Sure. The Kings game's interesting to me because there just aren't a lot of teams that have a Jordan Clarkson. So you're without Mike Conley, you're without Rudy Gobert, you get Boyan back, and then somebody comes off the bench and drops 45. That's the area where when you look at Dallas with Luka and Denver with Jokic and Memphis with Ja, and frankly, Memphis has a lot of guys, but they don't have that coming off their bench. And the Warriors with Steph. And you say, well, we don't have that guy. Donovan's great, but we don't. Donovan and Ja are probably pretty similar. We probably have close to that. But you get the idea, particularly with Doncic and Jokic. But they don't have that. They don't have they don't have the next guy. If Mike can get himself going to be, your consistent third scorer, then all of a sudden you've got this fourth scorer coming off the bench in Clarkson who dropped 45. And that's where the Jazz are a little different. That most teams don't have that guy. And that seems to be a key part to kind of, if we're going to be able to overcome our flaws the way everyone else has to come over their flaws, that's how we do it. I mean, the one thing that's really flawed about Dallas and Denver in the playoffs is they're going to come at you from the exact same angle on almost every possession. It's where the addition of Spencer Dinwiddie is pretty vital to Dallas because now they have a little more variation where they're bringing Doncic off a pin down to a curl, so he's not always bringing the ball up the floor, walking into possession again. When you played Houston and Harden over the years, he's on his 300th time coming up the floor with the ball by game 4. And you've seen it. And you've seen everything there is about it. And then it gets stagnant for them. And we've seen that in the playoffs. Jokic, who is a master and a genius and incredible to watch and a total joy, still is going to have the ball in the same spot 300 times by game 4. You begin to hopefully adapt to that. He's a genius basketball wise. He adapts to you too. And Doncic is too, but that's an advantage. The Jazz hopefully can come from Mike from here, Jordan from here, Don from here, Rudy picking this way, running these different things and getting a whole collection of offensive different answers at people than the rest of the team that's coming at you. Ja's coming at you almost every time. We've added that variance. Donovan was that way last year, particularly in the clutch. We've added variance to that this year. We're much more well-rounded late in games than we've ever been. All right, Milwaukee and the Jazz. Are they the two most scouted teams in the NBA, and how's that impacting them? And an NBA trend that has finally taken full effect and is impacting the Utah Jazz in maybe a negative way. We'll hit on that as we continue. Today's show is brought to you by Bet Online. College basketball's tournament is fully upon us. So for the latest odds, contests, player props, betonline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline is also continuing your sporting wagering information, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about trends. Bet Online, where the game begins. The tournament is upon us. Should be a great deal of fun. So jump aboard at betonline.net. Back to BetOnline for a quick second. The line to tonight's game between the Jazz and the Bucks is the Bucks by 1.5. I don't know how often we're going to be favored here in the next 11. Other games we care about for playoff matchups. Denver, who's at 6, is a 2-point dog to Philadelphia. And then the Warriors are a 12.5-point favorite against Washington. It's going to be hard for us to catch them at this point. And the Lakers are a 4-point underdog to Toronto, who's winning a bunch of important games. One of the things that I think's happened to us this year is we're the most scouted team in the league. And I say that all the time, that I think teams have scouted us more than any team in the league. They've seen us. We had this incredible year last year, which means everyone watched a ton of Utah Jazz offseason tape to try to figure out why we did what we did. There's no mystery to who we are anymore. And we're seeing it. We're the most, which is interesting tonight against Milwaukee, against our pick and roll offense. We've now seen the most switches of any team in the league. Our pick and roll offense is so good that teams just have simply decided, like, okay, we can't just play you drop or trap. If you trap us, we'll kill you. And now teams per 100 possessions are switching us 25 picks a game, where the next closest is Oklahoma City at 23, and then Dallas at 23 also, because you switch a bigger guy into Luka. Trae Young at 21 in Atlanta. So we're getting the most switched picks of any team in the league. That changes how we can play offensively. That's interesting because Bud didn't used to want to switch. We're not bad at it, by the way. We're the 5th best team in the league at handling the switch. That's a pretty good sign. Like, those are the areas where, because we're so scouted, we're able to make changes of what we're doing, and we've gotten better at some of these things. Here's the other area where I think we're most scouted. Last year, if you looked, the Utah Jazz were the only team in the NBA that was in the top 5 in denying shots at the rim and denying shots at 3 last year. I think Washington was close also. And then 2 years ago, when we played Oklahoma City, that's actually the open of my broadcast before, was that Oklahoma City was one of 2 teams in the league that was top 10 in denying the rim and denying 3, and we were top 5. That was actually the open of our broadcast on March 11th, 2020. Look at it now. Teams, and what Milwaukee decided to do a few years ago was, we're going to protect the rim, but it means we've got to give up 3s. There is no longer a team in the top 7 of the NBA denying shots at the rim that's also in the top 10 at denying 3s. Phoenix is the number 1 team in the league defensively denying shots at the rim. They're 11th in denying 3s. That's the best combination. It's why they're as good as they are. Golden State's number 2 at denying the rim. These are all the best defensive teams in the league, by the way. Denying the rim is the key to everything. Shots within 4 feet of the basket, according to Cleaning the Glass. Golden State's number 2. Boston's number 3. Utah's number 4. Milwaukee's number 5. What's interesting, number 6 is Oklahoma City. Number 7 is Miami at denying shots at the rim. Here's where those teams now rank, allowing 3-point shots. 30th, 29th, 27th, 22nd, 4 in the bottom 10, 11, 12, 13. So Phoenix is number 1 at the rim and 11th at denying 3s. Boston is number 3 at the rim and 13th at denying 3s. Utah's number 4 at the rim and 12th at denying 3s. It's still about as good a shot distribution as you can have, but you can't deny 3s in this league the way you once did. If you're committed to keeping the rim, the evolution of the league is happening against us, that you can't, or against everyone, that you can't just deny the rim and the 3 anymore. So as we keep Rudy at the rim, we end up having to give up some 3s more than we have before. It's a big change. The league's gone that direction. Kevin Pelton, of ESPN, has always said, defenses dictate the rim, offenses dictate 3s. The offenses have happened to now dictate 3s. Here's what's important tonight. We're going to try to keep Rudy near the rim because of Giannis. We got to try to change Giannis' shot chart. They have shooters. They'll have Grayson out there. They'll have Bobby Portis out there. They'll have Drew Holiday out there. And they'll have Chris Middleton out there. 4 shooters. Giannis driving. Rudy shadowing. Somebody else is probably on Giannis to start. I'll get to that in a second. Can we rotate well enough, despite our lack of size and maybe lack of athleticism, to impact some of those threes? That's the defensive story tonight. But it's also our playoff story defensively. Because in this day and age, if we're committed to having Rudy at the rim, we're going to have to give up threes in a way that we didn't used to have to. The league's gotten more skilled. There's more shooters. There's more. The systems are that way. Teams get it. We're the most scouted team in the league. They know how to play us. Offensively, they know that that's their goal, is to move Rudy out of the middle, and they're going to do it this way. Defensively, they know they're going to switch us more. We're the most switched team in the league. We're seeing this time and time and time and time again. It gets us ready for the playoffs. Milwaukee, I think, is the same way. They've been the same team now for 5 years also. We're the 2 winningest teams in the NBA since 16-17. They've got their title. We don't. Otherwise, the 2 winningest teams, they've been similar. Teams know them. It's part of the reason why I think they don't have this dominant run going on, and why you're seeing some things, in how they play. They miss Brook Lopez, but we all know, like, oh, you're playing them. I'm gonna get a ton of above the break threes against Milwaukee tonight. Everyone knows it. Be prepared. Position your guys quickly. Be there for that. Final thing, sorry, this has been a ton today. Lot of stuff, a lot of games, is Giannis. So Giannis gets pretty interesting. The Jazz have tried everything imaginable with Giannis. 4 years ago, the Jazz tried having Rudy Gobert guard Giannis. The 18-19 season, Rudy Gobert guarded Giannis for about 70% of his possessions. Giannis shot 17 of 31 against Rudy. He was 5 of 12 against Derek Favors. Like, that was who guarded him, was Giannis and Favors. In the 1920 season, the Jazz went to Royce O'Neal and Jeff Green, and that was a disaster. And Giannis averaged 40 points a game against us in 2 games and took 16 free throws a night in those 2 games. And torched Jeff Green and had actually, frankly, Royce did okay, and Rudy guarded him for 10 shots in 2 games, and he went 4 of 10. He hit 2 threes. In 2021, we kind of mixed-matched it, but Gobert was the primary defender again back on Giannis, and Giannis had his way. He went 11 of 19 against Rudy. Royce had him. He went 7 of 13. Faves had him for a little while. He was 5 of 12. In fact, I even think we've started a game with Faves and Gobert again for that matchup. This is where we've changed. The goal tonight, I think, I'm guessing just from watching us all year, will be Royce will guard Giannis, and Rudy will hover to the basket. And the key, as much as anything else, will be to keep Giannis off the line. It's what we did. Doncic had a great game, but he didn't shoot a ton of free throws until late in that game. And the first time we played him, he didn't shoot a bunch of free throws. The one game we played Giannis this year is not a great representation of anything because Milwaukee was so short-handed. They started George Hill, Pat Connaughton, Giannis's brother, and Giannis only took 2 free throws in that entire game. But that's what's to watch here tonight. That's the defensive matchup tonight, is can the Jazz keep a guy who in some games this year, Giannis has had 12 games this year with more than 15 free throws. He's had 40 games this year with more than 10 free throws. He's had 1 game all year with only 2 free throws. He's only had 2 games all year with under 5. He's only had, I think, 8 games with under 8. 9 games with under 8. Can you keep Giannis off the line by having Gobert hover around the rim, deny the rim, but you're going to have to give up those threes. So this all comes together. There was some semblance to why I talked about how the league has changed in those numbers, because here's a night where that's the case. If you're going to try to deny Milwaukee the rim, and particularly Giannis the rim, and Drew Holiday the rim, and Rudy's going to hover, they're going to pull him out with Bobby Portis. Can you keep Rudy at the rim, make Giannis's drive stop while being guarded by somebody other than Rudy, and yet still rotate out to shooters well enough that you impact three-point shots. It's a hell of a challenge. See how they do. That is Locked On Jazz today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you the information you needed to make your day better and get you ready for the Jazz and the Bucks and the gauntlet that's ahead for the Utah Jazz. Have a great one. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. Locked On Now is your daily podcast running through all the events of the NBA with the experts of the local experts of the NBA, available on YouTube at Locked On NBA or on the Locked On